Having you here
Yeah.
person takes a whole different meaning.
I used to keep them out of the room, and then people commented, "Hey, where's your dogs?" So they're command performance now. Anyways, morning everybody. The 4 studies we did coincidentally are kind of covering the whole Mesa Verde area. So the process again is we select a truck to have them dump their load at the CRNR facility. We then spread the material out, lay out cones to create a random grid pattern. We then select between 200 and 300 pounds of material to hand sort out and weigh into various categories. So the categories that we're saying are prohibited container contaminants, things that should not be in the black mixed waste bin, are green waste and food waste. There's a separate container for them. But since you are transitioning to a 3-cart program, we also try to see how much dry paper and cardboard are in there, easily recyclable materials like beverage containers. And then we also have a category for wet cardboard and paper, which would likely be dry and material going in the blue container. So anyways, the first studies that we did were actually over by the Santa Ana River, that part of Mesa Verde, kind of north and south of Adams. And that sort had the best result as far as food waste contamination. There was only 3.48% food waste. Unfortunately, they had a lot of green waste. 15% was green waste. Could have been landscapers that just said, hey, I'm going to dump this in somebody's container, because really you guys are fairly good on the green waste. But again, it might also be a situation where that resident has a big lot, they really need 2 containers. So again, that was not one of our better overall. About 18% of the sort was contaminated material. The next area was north of Adams, all the way over by the golf course and over by the river. That was very good on the green waste, only 5%, which is the 3rd best of all time. But the food waste, unfortunately, was 12% there, 12.31. And that's not horrible, but again, the goal is to try to get overall below 15%, and ideally below 10% would be just a wonderful participation rate. So overall, that area was 17.5% contaminated. We then moved a little bit closer to Harbor Boulevard with the sorts that we did in October. The first one was up kind of on either side of Baker, west of Harbor. Very good on the green waste, only a little over 4% green waste contamination, and pretty darn good on food waste, only 8.96% contamination. So at 13.4% overall, that was the best result we had gotten last year and this year. But then the next sort that we did, which is Mesa Verde, either side of Adams again, but closer to Harbor, they're the best that we've seen so far on the green waste, only 1.36%. There's hardly any green waste on that route. Food waste was 9.15%, also very good, anything below 10%. So overall at 10.51%, that was the best participation we've seen. The wet paper and cardboard, a little high on the sort 5 that I talked about. That was about 20%. But again, sort 6, 11%, very low level. So very good area. So again, I can answer specifics on that. So let me know if you have any questions.
I have a couple of quick questions and I'll move it on. On green waste that's in the prohibited green waste. Guess what I'm going to ask about? Does that include palm fronds, or do we know that that's not supposed to go?
We know that's not an acceptable material. Now we had some grasses, some, drought tolerant grasses. But again, we try to keep palm fronds in the trash category. We're trying to
Okay.
identify what should be going in the right container.
Then on the food waste, do you see that it's separate food waste, or is it food waste that might be in a container or in a can or something? Or how do you differentiate those two?
Well, what we try to do is some of it's containerized, so that we try to empty the container. So we're just weighing the food. But again, if it's in a plastic bag that's very light, we're not gonna to break it out. Typically we see the food mixed in what's obviously the kitchen trash bag. So and that'll include everything from
Talk about the
scrap
non-biodegradable ones,
yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So it appears that the kitchen caddies, hopefully that will help if they have an alternative to using that can. But that's the majority of the food waste we find is obviously a kitchen waste bag that they're
Finally, on the last study here, I think it's area 6 where the green waste was almost nothing. That's a big multifamily area.
Well, and that's the breakdown that I think hopefully we can get unit counts and ideas behind that data, because again, if they don't have green waste, of course they're gonna have it not show up in the trash can.
Okay, good.
Okay, I had one. On the green, well, actually, the gardeners, I'm curious, do they understand what's going on? Have we educated them as far as the
Good
green waste?
question. The regulations require the city and the district both to monitor and enforce self-haul requirements. So I think the first phase of that, probably starting in 2024, from what I've heard from Cal Recycle, is to get commercial landscapers on some type of permit monitoring reporting program. The individual residential gardeners are very hard to, get them all. There's not a great list. But again, I think working with city business licensing to try to target self-haulers is going to be a focus in 2024, because the state's asking about it now, and it is regulations to monitor self-haul, and that would be an example.
I personally don't think we put the onus on the gardener. We put it on the owner of the house to make sure that they tell their gardener, because I'm sure my gardener has a city business permit. I don't, there's no way he does. So by focusing on the gardeners, we're gonna miss them. And we could stick a letter or a notice on their green waste can and say, hey, make sure but the gardener's not gonna read that.
No.
We've got to make sure that our residents, who are the ones really responsible, they've got to know to tell their gardener.
Yeah, no, I think from what I've seen, most of the gardeners are pretty good about taking that material to a facility where they get their mulch from. And so it's a nice closed loop system. But again, we don't know that every one of them is doing it. So again, that's, I think, going to be one of the focuses of the state is, here's my checklist. Do you have all your self-haulers being monitored? And I think landscapers will come up sooner rather than later.
I know my gardener, I put my lime green can out the day before, and he knows, I've told him, anything you cut goes in there except the palm fronds. But he didn't cut many palm fronds. But then he'll go across the street, because he does the lady across the street from me, and she puts her black container out. She got a small, and that's where he puts it. He doesn't, he's not going to go rooting around looking for her. So again, I need to educate my neighbor, I guess.
When I was on city council, what we did, we asked for a meeting for all the gardeners, and they all came out and they all were there. And we talked to them and asked any questions. They were so worried what was going to happen to them, as far as their business and so forth, that they came. But that's one way to educate them too, where, like this is a big place. We could have everybody there or something. Anyway, just a thought, but just the idea that a one-to-one that you need to, there are places that they don't have gardeners. They do it themselves. So we have to consider that too, in certain areas that lend itself toward a different way of doing things.
Right.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand, 2 of these studies would be considered compliant under the upcoming law, correct? Because they're under 15.
Well, that's a goal for an excellent program would be below 15, below 10% is wonderful.
Right.
You guys have had a program for a while. So again, the state's requirement is 75% reduction of what's going in the landfill. So technically you could argue 25% even is a pretty good program because again, you're also sorting a lot of that material out in another container. But again, to me, it's kind of easy pickings when you have a container already to put the food waste in it. So when we started doing this, around 20 and all that, it's like, I didn't see a lot of evidence of real efforts to keep it out. And so that's kind of how we established this in different cities as, the target, what you should shoot for.
But if
you fall a little bit short, you're still
well, that's
clients.
if nothing else changed, we're still within the parameters of where we need to be, and on
Yeah, I
the
think
good side of
I think you have a good program. I think it's always good to compare areas, and then, like I said, the next set of data would be, hey, can we get unit counts, and are these properties that have big yards? Do we have areas that have big yards that don't have a green waste issue? Those then would be, we don't have to educate there as much, but these other pockets, we've seen a lot of food percentage.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And along with that, in our own city, obviously, at some point, can't wait to see the awesome spreadsheet maybe from everything. But what about just in your experience, neighboring districts, cities? What do you have any sort of ideas where we stack against the rest, so to speak?
Well, I haven't done a lot of neighboring studies, but again, my impression is about 22% contamination levels are average across all programs through 20, 30 years of doing these studies. Green waste programs, 22% contamination by weight. You have had food waste, green waste recycling probably longer than just about anybody. So, I don't know that you've had green waste above, let's see, I think 16% and 15% sorts 2 and 3. Everything else is below 10% and well below 10%. Food waste, 16% is the high. Again, I think you've got pockets where you have challenges. But overall, I think you're probably doing better than virtually any city because you've had more time to ramp up. Your challenges are probably areas where you have a lot of turnover, so you have to re-educate those people, maybe some language barriers in some areas. But again, I think these studies and the lid flipping are good to target specific areas where it's like, all right, what do we have to do here?
Right.
These guys aren't really close to where they should be compared to the other pockets that we're looking at.
Cool. Thank you.
I think part of that education, and part of why what we need to do is, and Scott had brought this up at the CAC meeting last week. I think a lot of our residents still aren't sure which food can go in there. The best example is fog. They can pour their grease right in there. But people don't, I mean, nobody wants to pour grease in it, you know what I mean? So we're still ramping that up. That's still a part of our process, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know,
Food's gonna
That
be the
might be a
biggest challenge.
campaign.
Yeah.
It might be a campaign you do later on. Let's target, these materials.
you need to call Gail Anderson and get back on KTLA morning news like you were before. Bob, you had a question.
Do you do the same sorting process for the city?
No, we have 7 haulers doing recurring service in the city, and what we're tracking at this point is just their compliance rate, number one, as far as rolling out programs. Then number 2, we look at their overall programs and how much food waste they're processing, where they're processing it. So we haven't gotten to waste comp studies. They're just doing the route reviews this year. So like I said, you guys are a little bit ahead of the game on most folks.
25% is, as Director Eccles pointed out, is the compliance number. Isn't there, if we achieve a 10% level, aren't there some benefits like
Well, it helps overall. See, the problem is the way the state wrote the regulations, I don't think gives you a clear win as a residential program, because they're saying it's 25% at the landfill statewide. There's no individual city mandate for you guys to say I'm doing well. So the analogy I always use is it's like running from the bear. As long as you're not the slowest running from the bear, you're going to be all right. But again, I think there should be accolades for people that are significantly exceeding the standard. But again, we didn't hit 50% the first measurement. 2025 is when the state's going to measure to see if we're at 75%. And, I think historically, the last time I calculated, I figured you were at 72% before the sort started. I think I had done something along those lines. And so I'd be very surprised if you weren't above that 75% level.
I thought there was some sort of reduction in finding and whatnot if a jurisdiction reached 10%. Anyway, maybe not. So the comp study where there were rentals, they did pretty well.
Well, again, I don't know the breakdown of percentages of rentals. That would be something maybe we could look at the makeup of the property, maybe look at city zoning to try to figure out how much was, multifamily properties versus single family. And then we could guesstimate the level of renters versus owner occupants.
Well, in Schaefer's area, director, chair, sharing, whatever you're called, that I thought did pretty good. And that's basically the only large number of renters, I think, in all of Mesa Verde, until you get over near McDonald's and whatnot. But so they did pretty good. I would like to ask staff and you to provide us with some focus on how we're going to educate, the particular areas that, that you and staff believe need some attention. And I think it would be better to be sooner than later. We've had, like you said, we've had a historical presence in the community asking food waste to be, taken out of the mixed waste containers, and we seem to be successful with that. But that was since 2016 that we've had that emphasis. So we're headed towards a time when we need to be doing this correctly in the state sides. And is the reporting that will go to the state, is it strictly the city's reporting? Are we going to be are we lumped in with the city when the actual reports have to go to some regulatory agency?
Excuse me, you have a separate section now within the Costa Mesa City annual report. So
Oh,
it actually quantifies district level participation, tonnages, procurement, all of that. So the state's doing a much better job separating that out. Again, I believe the state is going to do sampling at the landfills, similar to how we're doing, to come up with that. Are we at 75% reduction of organics? So again, there's not really a measurement and there's not really a reportable or a calculation in the annual report to say the sanitary district is diverting this much of their organic waste, because it's not a mandate on you specifically, mandate on the whole state. And so you really don't ever get a clear measurement of how you're doing. So again, it's good to do studies and again, probably calculate what you think your diversion of organics is, just, so again, you can show the bear, I'm out in front, catch somebody easier.
They're gonna do this study at the landfill, which could be every city in Orange County.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
statewide.
and we're
Statewide.
doing an exemplary job and we get nothing for it.
Yeah, probably not a gold star, but you're helping get to the goal.
We can sleep better at night.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you're doing your part. Now let's, see.
You know,
Pulls me away.
Mike, you mentioned there's a separate way, there's a different way now to calculate what the district is doing within the city reporting process.
Well, there's separate sections in the annual report that are specific to the district and all the districts.
The city's annual report.
There's actually a separate Costa Mesa Sanitary District section within the SB 1383 changes that they made to the annual report.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see that data or a typical type of report. So at least I would be able to better understand.
Yeah, there's actually a summary. I can print one out and get it to staff. There's a summary of the annual report that gives all the data that was input in. So again, I don't know because I haven't printed that out specifically looking for the separation, but it might be just district information. I'll see if I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be interesting to see. And then I would encourage staff. I'm a big fan of pilot programs. So each of the 130 areas or 75 areas, that you eventually would have an opportunity to do composition studies. We're going to find focused needs, and you've identified them in the 4 or 5 composition studies, that you did today. I would like to see sooner than later how the staff and you are going to help the district get some focus on, not, it's not to hammer these people, and it's not to say, this little particularly part of the city did really well. It's that, we need to do better educating them in particular things, green waste carts or whatever. I don't know.
That's been our goal all along, is to make sure that education component is what we do the strongest.
But what I'd like to do is we do a generalized education component now. And Mike, I think, and staff are talking about some focused areas, which is a step beyond what we've done historically. And what I'd like to do is see that plan laid out sooner than later.
We are working on drafting some letters to these specific areas that targets what was found in their area. So if we need to target green waste and suggest a second organics container, or just say you're doing a great job with your food waste. So we are working on drafting some targeted letters based on these waste composition studies.
Okay.
My turn. Anyway, I would like to share with you what I do. You know, you have these green bags. They're little bags. I order just a box of them. It lasts for a long time. And then every time we're eating, I put everything that I need to of that into the bag, tie it, put it in the refrigerator, and then take it out and put it into the green waste disposal. Now I know it looks like, you know, there's so much little thing, but you know, it's a good way to do it. I have tried to educate all the people that I know to do something like that. And that if they buy those little green bags, actually it's really a saving on having to dump it into and make a trash can dirty, you know. Anyway,
Yeah, I think, I know we do the same thing. We have the biodegradable bags and
yeah,
that does help.
yeah.
So, go ahead, Brent.
Last thing for me, just, I just want to make sure I understand, because I think I do. 25% contamination across every city jurisdiction that uses landfill A, correct?
Yeah, well, every landfill across the state of
Right.
California, they're gonna do representative
Yeah.
sample measurements to see. They may have certain representative types of landfills that they do, but it's a statewide measurement.
Yep, so we could forget each part of our city. We could overall be 10% as a district and we're crushing, and then city B across the way is like, you know, 50% contamination. So be it, right? I mean, it's just, we're-
It's just, it's hard without the detail, because again, just anecdotally, I think it's easier for residents to have high participation rates and sort materials because that container's there and it's just you at your property. I think it gets difficult the more units you add to the equation when they're sharing a container, but you guys don't have that. You have, each unit has their own containers. They don't share a bin. I think businesses and larger multifamily properties probably historically have generated more of that food waste, and nobody knows how much garbage disposals help or hurt the food waste recycling. So it's really a moving target that we're trying to hit with this dart. And so I think 10% is, again, that's a bulletproof thing. If you say
right,
this is
but-
where we're at. Your program's excellent.
But
Again,
I mean, I'm an AYSO guy, so ironically, I'm not big on participation trophies. At the end of the day, great job, Sand District. Here's your participation trophy for doing what you need to do, but yet the rest of the surrounding county or state, whatever, isn't doing their gig. So then I guess on the flip side, what's the consequence?
well, again, the state ultimately has fining authority.
Right,
Non-participants will be the big one, but
Right.
then, you know, people not putting things in the right containers habitually. If a city doesn't do anything about it, doesn't show a monitoring program, doesn't show they're enforcing the law, that'd probably be the next tier of who might be fined. Again, it's kind of a brave new world where we're
Right.
not certain.
we're years away from that.
Oh, yeah.
From the punishment, the stick and carrot whole thing, we're years away from them actually issuing fines, probably.
It would be very tough if somebody's trying. Again, you would have
Right.
to be
If
trying.
you're giving your A effort, you're, you know,
I would,
Uh.
you know, as this thing evolves and the enforcement becomes a bigger deal, you would hope the state would look at, you know, what is Costa Mesa Sand doing from an education? So what are you doing? You know, you're doing sorts, you're doing, hopefully that evidence will prove to them that we're at least making it. And I'm gonna pick on Fullerton. Fullerton isn't, right? You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
But again, you create this huge bureaucracy of enforcement people that we don't, we can't afford.
yep.
So it's,
I mean, my point is we could be at 10. I'll use Fullerton only because you brought him up, is at 50. At the end of the day, who really cares? Because we're not going to meet the 20 as the city, county, state, whatever.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's gonna boil down to how huge this
Right.
enforcement and this checking and
Well,
compliance
see.
department's gonna be.
2024 is the year where the state's actually saying, no, the first 2 years were education.
Right.
Now it's enforcement time. So we'll see what 2024 brings.
Create a lot of new jobs.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what it's doing.
I would say that Director Eccles is right in the general sense with the state. They don't do enforcement. But this happens to be in the Air Resources Board's jurisdiction. And they're not bashful about enforcement. So I would.
Agree of that.
Yeah. Oh, I know all about them. Yeah.
So I mean,
No doubt.
it's a different, a different potential. I don't know in the end what they'll do, but they're significantly more likely to do enforcement. And if we're a jurisdiction that's like Mike's, we're at least got our shoes off and running from the bear. Whereas somebody else that doesn't have anything, it's gonna be slower.
Well, and
That is a good analogy.
when it goes to air and all that, then guess what? All that's the minute these things come down, it's going to be tied up in the courts anyway.
Oh, yeah. No,
So we're years away from it.
I agree. Well, thank
Anything
you.
else
Mike.
for Mike or for Marissa? Thank you.
very
Always a
much.
good report. We appreciate it. And I didn't see a whole lot of smiling there, but he seems to be happy. So I think.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, at least he's wearing shoes today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. All right, thank you. Anything else, Marissa, on that item? Okay. Well, let's go to item 3.
Thank you,
Speaking
Mr.
of the
President.
devil.
Actually, that was good discussion. That's leading into our next item.
Yeah, just gonna speak of the devil.
Yes, how do we enforce those who are not complying with SB 1383 and have high level contaminations? So I'm gonna turn it over to Marissa, but before she goes into details, I do want to share with the board that we have met with CRNR several times on developing some enforcement procedures, what those fees are, what's the due process going to be like. So we had those discussions. We have some preliminary ideas we want to share with you. We're looking for some directions from the board. Do you like what we're presenting to you? Do you want us to tweak it a little bit, go back to drawing boards? Ultimately, we're seeking some directions of where you want us, how you want us to proceed on enforcing SB 1383. So I'm going to turn it over to Marissa. She's going to tell you more details. Obviously, Mike Carey's here also to answer some questions as well. So turn it to Marissa.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning again, board. So as Scott said, this morning we're presenting a proposed enforcement plan for collection container contamination. So per SB 1383, jurisdictions are required to perform contamination monitoring and provide education. A jurisdiction may also at its discretion impose a fine or a fee, but that is not required by SB 1383 for residential contamination. Waste haulers may also impose processing fees, contamination processing fees that are independent of jurisdiction issued fines. So our agreement, the district's agreement with CRNR does outline a contamination monitoring protocol and fee schedule. And the district's operation code also outlines an SB 1383 notice of violation and administrative citation schedule. So based on this, staff is recommending the enforcement plan that you'll see on the screen. If we could just scroll up to the chart, that would be great. So just to get started on what you'll be seeing on the screen, CRNR will issue a courtesy notice if contamination of 25% or more is identified in a cart. Contamination or courtesy notices will also include education on accepted and prohibited container materials. After the third courtesy notice issued by CRNR within a 12-month period, CRNR may issue a $25 processing fee. Customers will have the opportunity to dispute the fees through CRNR's administrative procedure. The district will receive monthly reports on all fees, notices and fees that are issued. Once CRNR issues a third contamination processing fee, the district will start our contamination monitoring process of that property. If contamination is identified by the district, a notice of violation would be issued. A customer would have 60 days to correct that violation. If it's not corrected within 60 days, the district may issue an administrative fine not to exceed $75. If it's not corrected, subsequent fines may be issued. A second may not exceed $150, and a third may not exceed $300. Administrative citations issued by the district will also include a procedure for contesting the citation. That concludes the presentation on the proposed plan. We're now seeking your feedback and direction. Mike Carey with CRNR is also available to answer any questions that you have.
Questions? Go ahead, Brett.
So I saw this coming, I asked some earlier questions. Why? Why are we doing this? We're not getting fined.
So we do have to conduct contamination monitoring
Oh.
and issue education. The district issuing of a citation, that is at your discretion. That portion is not required by SB 1383. CRNR's contamination processing fees are separate and are built into the contract with CRNR.
Right.
But the district is based on SB 1383 requirements. The district does not have to issue administrative citations, but we do have to conduct monitoring and provide education.
100%. So, I mean, as we talked about, CRR&R can charge us a contamination fee, but we could all be under, I'll just use 15%. Great job for a citywide. But again, CRR&R across town, whatever, different city, they're at 50%. Are we not subsidizing the contamination fee from the other district or city?
So the contamination processing fees, the district receives 80% of that fee and CRNR keeps the 20%, but any fees issued for our customers are going to apply to contamination here only. As far as I understand, there's not going to be any crossing of contamination processing fees from other jurisdictions. Is that what you're asking?
No. Okay, forget what's in front of us for a second. If we don't have to charge any of this stuff, correct?
So the contamination processing fees, CRNR has, it's in the contract, so they're able to issue those processing fees.
They have the ability to do so, but our contract said, all right, if and when this comes, here's what our pre-negotiated thing is.
So it gives them it gives them the authorization to issue those processing fees outside of SB 1383.
So that's what I'm saying. We're gonna subsidize their fees for other customers of theirs.
That's not my understanding, but I don't know if someone else
Well,
can speak better. on
that's
that
the way it
question.
would be.
Only if the other jurisdiction isn't charging the same fees, right?
But that's what I'm saying, like, none of this makes any sense. We don't have to charge any of these fees, but now you're telling me CRR&R is gonna enforce because it's in the contract, some sort of contamination fee on the district?
No, the processing fee is charged to the customer who is found to be contaminating their container.
Okay. After the third offense?
Right, so they'll receive 3 courtesy pickup notices, letting them know that contamination was found, providing education. If after the third courtesy notice within 12 months, there is contamination found again, at that point, there would be a
So
25.
they're gonna charge the customer why are we even talking about this?
So this is for 25%. Well, so we're giving you the opportunity to provide feedback on how you want that process to take place after it goes through CRNR's process. So it can come to the district at that point for,
So, Director Echols, let's say someone's not
Yeah.
participating in the program at all. Let's say they're just contaminated 100%.
Right.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
You are okay with.
For the first year at this point, absolutely. We're not getting fined. So I asked these earlier questions. Now we're gonna charge customers when overall our city may be at 15% or 10, I don't know, whatever it is.
purpose of the process fee is to change people's behavior. We want them to change their behavior and go into this next route of source separating and putting all your food scraps and your green waste in one container, your recyclables in another container, and trash in one container. That's from previous experience, that's the only way you're going to change people's habits, hit them in the pocketbook.
Well,
So
somehow
we're giving them several opportunities to correct it. We're getting here's 3 strikes. You have an opportunity to correct it. If not, okay, we're going to fine you. What else can we do to change your behavior?
But haven't we been changing their behavior? By the numbers we just saw, we're all under 20% for the most part, at least on those pickups. So people have changed their behavior in the last several years with no fines, our good education, all this stuff, but no fines. It's already changed.
Well, again, and this may be some more direction we need from the board, because I understand our focus was 10%. Is anywhere between 10 to 15%, you're fine. But if you're at 20%, then that was the direction the board gave us. Okay, that could be grounds for a fine. We want you below 15% You're at 20%, you're not there yet. We want you to do a better job. And here's process for you to help you change it.
But the law says 25%. How can I tell a customer the law says 25%, but we're gonna tell you have to do 15?
Because, and again, this goes way, and this probably goes back before, Director, as you were on the board here. This board has set a goal of 75% diversion, right?
Okay.
That is the district's goal. If you want to hit that goal, you're going to have to change people's behavior. Now, if you don't want to hit that 75% goal, then tell the staff, if you're comfortable going 60%, 50%, whatever, that's fine. But in years past, the goal of this district was to hit 75% diversion. That was the goal.
To achieve what?
Achieve 75% diversion.
75%?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But then the numbers you just mentioned 75, but then you were talking about 10 and 15. I'm confused.
So 10 and 15, 10 is ideal, under 15, doing a good job. And we're just providing education at that point,
Right.
telling customers you're doing a good job or things could be a little bit better. The 25% threshold is for these notices and fees only. And if customers are already performing at 10 or 15%, then this wouldn't even come into play because they wouldn't be at a 25% level of contamination. So we'll continue to educate, but a notice and a fee and a fine wouldn't be issued unless it's 25% within the first 12 months. So within a 12-month period. So if we're educating and customers are well under that 25%, then this wouldn't come into play. It would be anybody who's performing well above, what our goal and what our target is and above this 25%.
I'm not understanding that whatsoever, but all right. Well, my opinion is we do nothing on this, at least for the next year, table this and see how the behavior is, but that's my opinion.
And I certainly appreciate your frustration. I mean, I mean, if the standard's 25 and nobody else is doing it, why the hell should we do it? I get it, totally get it. But I also think, this is our district and I take a lot of pride in what we do. And if this is a component of helping people get there, to be honest with you, when I read the chart the first time, I thought, we're way too liberal. We're way too lenient on these folks. 3 notices. I mean, I remember growing up, if I didn't take out the trash, it didn't take my old man. He didn't give me 3 chances to correct my behavior. It was 1 chance. So initially I read this and I thought, we're too lenient. But when I look at that in conjunction with what you're talking about, and I totally get it. I mean, I think we're a good step. I think we're a good first step in this. I think we need to tweak some of this. I mean, I don't want to be, somewhere down the road when the AQMD or the state starts, they're going to levy fines. I guarantee it. We're not going to get it. The city's going to get it.
Right.
And at some liaison meeting, we're going to get nailed for it. So I want to be proactive and I still take a lot of pride in the fact that we have set that 75% goal and I want to get there. But I totally get your frustration. I mean, why the hell should I do it in Fullerton or Santa Margarita or whoever's not doing it?
Yeah. And again, my thing's money. Now we're charging people and we're not getting a charge. It's like,
no, I mean, just the administrative process of doing these
Right.
fees is gonna be a burden on CRNR and on us. But I still get back to, damn it, I wanna be at 75%. And if this helps us get there, $25 is. How many lattes is $25? I don't drink latte.
Like one.
One?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, I want to get to our goal and forget about everybody else. Not forget, but take that into consideration. So.
Is
So,
that, follow, is that capped at 300 for the year?
Yes, it's 300 a year.
I
I'm
I'm just gonna
hadn't thought
tell
about that.
people to write their $300 check, because that's what they'll do.
That's what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what I do like Director Eccles' comment about we need to transition into this a little bit. Maybe we take a broader look during that first year to see. I mean, to start off right away with the fine schedule like this, maybe a little harsh, but again, it may be what we needs. But I think we need some time to develop it as 1383
It's kind of like,
ramps up.
it's like the trash carts in public view. When we give people their first notice, they comply. Right? We've never fined anyone for trash carts in public view, and we give them at least 3, just like this, 3
I know.
times.
I know.
So we think, once they get a couple of notices, okay, hopefully we believe they're going to change their behavior.
But when, I don't think we put this in CRNR's contract and or CRNR asked for it to be put in the contract. Yeah, which was that? Was it this
I
board?
think we put it.
Was it this board? Did staff create this because?
There's an element in the SB 1333, there has to be an enforcement element. And so that's why we put it in the contract. We
Okay.
have some kind of enforcement element in the contract.
Okay, so let's get beyond that. When does this proposed process start? At the end of 2025?
No, at SB 13,
Any-
they enforcement should start on January 1st, 2024.
2020, so it starts 2024.
Next,
The opportunity for.
In a
it to
month and a half.
start. Does CRNR, this is gonna require a truck driver to get to observe something and get out of there and walk up to the door and put some information in the thing.
Yeah, Mike, you want to say, the truck driver is not gonna do, the only time the truck driver would really get involved, if truck driver is down the street and he sees, cardboard boxes in the organic cart overflowing and the lid's open and he can see that. He's not gonna get out of the truck. They're not allowed to get out of the truck to lift the lids. They're gonna have someone else do that.
I don't care about the lift the lid process.
I'm
How is CRNR going to know that a resident has reached the first level?
The progressive level of the cart tagging and the documentation of each visit to that resident's home and the different color tags. If you notice in this staff report, there's a yellow tag first indicating this is your first warning. Second warning would be a red tag, which escalates. Third warning is a letter sent to the home.
Oh, on the carts. The
The
tags.
tags are on the
cart.
carts, right?
Yeah.
And keeping in mind that based on even what Mike Ballier was just going over, the percentages of contamination that we have within the entire routes throughout the city are typically below let's go with 15%, typically below that. The 25% that we're talking about on an individual person's cart is for the most egregious of offenders. Route wide, we're well under that. The goal from our standpoint isn't to collect fines. That's not what we want to do. Our goal is to get compliance and educate the people. We're going to do everything within our power leading up to that third mailed notice, make sure the residents are educated and provide them the tools to break down the barriers that are inhibiting them from successfully achieving that 75% diversion.
I hearken back to what we did with the trash containers on Placentia. It was personal. It was personal talking to the residents that I think moved the needle substantially. So I'm not sure that putting a tag on the cart will be sufficient explanation for the egregious, offenders. It, is this similar to what you do in other jurisdictions?
Similar to what we will be doing in other jurisdictions beginning January 1st.
Same fee schedule and everything.
Similar fee schedules. Yeah, most cities are going with around the $25 mark.
Okay. I think a bigger deterrent, instead of charging them $25, tell them they're not gonna have their trash picked up until they, that'll get them, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm okay with it.
And follow up to Director Uden, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to be clear because I thought the question was, how are you monitoring if they're above 25%? How is CRR&R identifying? Because I know where this is going, I think. How do you know, all right, my trash is contaminated by 30% 5 times in 1 year? How do you know that?
Well, visually determining the 25% is challenging, correct? So it's moderately subjective. It will be documented with photo evidence attached to the customer's account for each instance of claimed contamination.
So the driver is going to be lifting the lid.
Or our route auditors when we go out and do lid flips throughout the community.
Wow.
Which we're currently doing. We've been doing for years.
No, I know. I just, there's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of fights. There's gonna be a lot of legal on this one. I will not buy that. I'm not gonna fight your auditor. There's no way.
Well,
No way.
it is, so the driver, basically, the only real opportunity he has is, he or she has is visual. And that will change substantially when we get the third cart. Because the visual right now is, boxes that they haven't bothered to cut down. So those things, in the blue cart, it doesn't make any difference whether they stick up or not, because that's not contamination. I mean, that's proper placement of the big cardboard pieces. So I think that, I think this will be less of a concern. And we don't even get the third cart until potentially after this program starts. I mean, it's a spring, isn't it the spring when, we start trying to figure out how to get the blue cards? And that process is gonna be more concern to the neighbors than this. But I think the drivers themselves aren't gonna have a very big opportunity to find contamination once we get the blue cards. I mean, it'll be lessened substantially.
So the drivers are gonna see the obvious violate. I mean, the guys that don't have the time to cut down their Amazon boxes,
Right.
That's where the drivers are gonna take. Again, as much as we may not like it, it's these these route auditors.
Sure.
And some of it's gonna be spurred by my neighbors throwing the wrong thing in I mean, we're gonna have some of that too.
Again, it would have to be 25%. Your neighbor would have to be throwing a lot of waste in your cart.
Not in my
To
car,
achieve, not in your cart.
in her car.
President, may I suggest, so we do have an enforcement program in place. My suggestion is maybe we hold off on enforcing it until the third cart's rolled out. We could talk about enforcement procedures when we're doing our town hall meetings. So it's another good way of educating the public about source separating. So basically, the board prefers we can start, if you're okay with this procedures, we can start implementing the enforcement in the fall of 2024 after all the 3 carts have been delivered.
I would even, Scott, I don't have a problem with that waiting, like Director Eccles said, if we give it some time to see how it plays, okay. I mean, no one's gonna be paying their bills off of what we're gonna collect in fees anyway, so, but I would like to see us maybe sit down with CR, and this could even be an ad hoc committee from the board to sit down with CR&R and go over some of this. I'm curious to see what you're talking about with other jurisdictions.
Mhm.
I really, if these other jurisdictions are putting in a higher fee or, right, then that tells me that they're not the bad guys.
Sure.
They're trying to do what we're trying to do. But if we have a city or a jurisdiction that says, we're not gonna do anything, we're not gonna have an education program, those are the ones that are hurting us.
Sure.
So we can give that some thought, Scott, if that's okay, Marissa. I mean, let's take a look at maybe having something from the
So-
board that can
Yeah,
participate.
let's revisit when this process goes into effect, because CR&R will be our eyes and ears in the field.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, they already are, because they have 25 jurisdictions, that have the 3-cart system. And so that brings the question is, are those jurisdictions any better or worse than the 2-cart system that we have now?
Based on the characterizations that we've done recently, you guys are in a better place. A lot of that is because you have the 2-cart system and you're not getting the contamination in the recycling cart. So once you implement that, that might spike a little bit during the learning phase. You're going to have contamination in the trash cart because people are learning to adjust to putting things that they were putting in the trash cart into the recycling cart. So there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve there. Overall, you guys are doing very well comparatively.
Well, we've had in place the green card since 2016. I mean, so we're 6 years into that process, and we're doing reasonably well. So I would think I would like staff, based on the comments we've had, to come back with a plan that on when to implement this, and it not, based on the law and based on our previous experience.
And just as a follow-up, because I heard you, Scott, if we just, let's put this off till the fall, we said, or, but I don't want to say we're approving this and it's going to kick in the fall. I want this to be re-reviewed, maybe through an ad hoc, whatever it is, because I think some more data over the course of the next 6-9 months, and then maybe, I don't know, next summer, we agendize this again and talk
Absolutely.
our way through it.
Yeah, very clear, and I think that's what your intent was
Yeah.
anyway.
So, in your November 27th board agenda, if it's okay with the board, I can put on the item on the agenda, create an ad hoc committee to review enforcement procedures.
That's
Yeah, I think that's
that'll work.
good. Yeah. And then that committee could report over the next 6 months in collaboration with you all.
We have to sit down with.
By next summer, we can have the same similar meeting with more information.
Not a problem. I think we also need to, when we're talking about these fines and what CR&R does, they're not the only hauler in the county, right? Or in the area. Is there any way of knowing what other fee schedules are going to be done by the different? Maybe we can talk that through this committee. But I would be curious to see what your competitors are doing if we can.
So would I.
Open their books.
You know what? You are a lot smarter than you look. That's excellent.
Thank you.
That's funny. That's a good one.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move to item 4. Let's get off trash and talk about smell.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, one of the issues, we have when.
Can we take a 2-minute break? I mean, Director Eccles.
Eccles is ready. Go for it, Bobby. All right, so let's just take a quick break.
Okay, it's only 2 of us to run it.
We get through quick. We ready, Director?
Yeah.
I was worried. All right, so then let's go to item 4, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. So one of the issues that we deal with with maintaining sewer pump stations is to control or mitigate odors that are created by hydrogen sulfides that are found in pump stations. The 20 pump stations that we maintain in the district, there are 2 stations that we experience significant odor issues, and that's Eldon and the President Pump Stations. Eldon Pump Station, we get complaints from the Santa Ana Country Club, from the memberships who complains to the general manager, who gives me a call or gives Marks a call. Over at President's Pump Station, there is a resident right there adjacent, right there at the end of the cul-de-sac at President Place, right adjacent to the station. He lets us know, hey, the odors are pretty bad here at the stations. So I sat down with Mark and together we came up with a plan to help mitigate those odors. And we believe what you see on the screen is an effective method of mitigating those odors. It's these charcoal canisters that absorbs the odors and then just emits back in the atmosphere an odorless gas. It seemed to be at the present pump station. It appears to be working very effectively. We haven't heard anything from the resident on President Place. However, at the end of October, I reached out to the general manager at Santa Country Club, said, "Hey, are you still receiving complaints?" He said, "Yes, we are." And so we did some further investigation. We tested the gas levels at a manhole that's near the station and another manhole that's upstream of the station. And as you see in your report, the levels, hydrogen sulfide levels were 2 to 5 parts per million. And according to the chart in your staff report, that does create that rotten egg smell. So we think that might be the smoking gun where the smell is coming from. And so we went ahead and plugged and sealed those manholes. Also, inside the wet well of the Eldon pump station, there used to be a fan in there that helped control the odors and push it down back into the wet well. Mark is in the process, our district engineer is in the process of redesigning that fan and getting it back installed. We think once that's in operational, that's going to greatly help as well. But we do believe that these canisters are effective. So we will continue using these for mitigating the odors at President and Eldon pump stations. Until then, so that's pretty much the end of my staff report. Happy to answer any questions. Mark here as well to answer any questions you may have. So.
Okay, so that it's the golf course patrons that are complaining. What about the folks on the other side of the street?
The wind.
Well, I'm just gonna say the prevailing wind
Yeah.
pushes into the country
Into the
club.
golf course.
Yeah, but
Tony, if you can go up in the market. So
Yeah.
this is, everyone knows Tony Gomez. He's
Good morning, everyone.
responsible for maintaining our pump stations. If you have any questions about how he maintains them, how he cleans them, Tony's is available to answer any questions.
so the neighbors have been pretty,
Yeah, the neighbors at Eldon Pump Station haven't complained at all.
and it's, if I correct, there's that veterinary place and then a couple of residents right there.
Right, right. There's a lady who's always doing gardening, and I asked her if she had gotten the smells lately. She said she hasn't. She said that we done something different that it helped a lot.
This apparatus that you guys put in, when I first looked at it, I thought, well, all the smells are gonna come out of the top, the holes at the top, but that really is a draft in, correct?
No.
Am I right? That's where it comes out?
Yes, that's the exhaust. What you're looking at is a 55-gallon drum full of activated carbon. Are you familiar with the Brita water filters where they have a little cartridge you put in the Brita filter and and you pour the water in and the water trickles through the carbon in the little Brita filter, and that's what removes any foul taste from the water in your tap. This is similar, except instead of a little cartridge, we have a 55-gallon drum of little activated carbon pellets. And so in both of those, on the left-hand side of the blue 55-gallon drum, you'll see a little stub of a pipe. And that is a pipe that's attached to the wet well where all the sewage is. And the foul air exits that pipe, goes into the 55-gallon drum, and as it migrates through the 55-gallon drum, the carbon absorbs all the odor compounds, just like in water. It removes all the foul taste, and then clean air is released through the diffuser on top of the activated carbon.
When I first looked at that, I see my RV hose, first of all, but I wondered what MacGyver put that, I was thinking, Tony, did you build that that's an actual kit that comes from a manufacturer, I assume.
No, that's your staff doing a great job of installing this.
So they built this.
Yes, the district ordered 2 carbon canisters. We handed it over to Tony and his crew, and they went out, bought all the parts and pieces and everything they needed to install this system. And they did it very quickly. I'm very impressed with what your staff has done on these 2 stations.
But when I thought about MacGyver, I was correct.
Yes.
You know who MacGyver was?
Yes.
As young as you are, I would
Yeah, there was a remake of that series. He probably saw.
I guess the remake. But I mean, is this working?
Yes, it is actually. There's a little trick that I did. I cut a piece of wire, copper. Copper is really sensitive to H2S, and I put it top of the container. And usually copper would turn blue if there's H2S present, and it hasn't.
Really?
Right.
If you walk, President Schaefer, if you walk up to this unit at Eldon, which happens to be the one on the right in the trees there, and you take a whiff of what's coming out, you're not going to smell anything. Tony and Jesse is on, well, I guess I thought Jesse went out to do the air monitoring recently.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So Jesse monitored the air at the manholes upstream of the station, and he's the one that determined there was this 2 to 5 ppm of hydrogen sulfide in the actual sewer system. And so, as your general manager noted, there was some leakage of, I'll say, foul odors from those 2 manholes. And what Jesse and probably Tony subsequently, they're the ones that are keeping those manholes sealed. But by doing that, you're forcing the air through this system. And so that's probably reduced, I guess, this reduced it some, plugging up the places where the foul odor escapes the system, helped it even further.
Well, so this is dependent on the system being plugged and sealed.
Yes, it
There are
is.
many manholes where, what, is there a fan on this unit?
There was, the reason why we haven't completed the replacement, or I'll call it major repair on that fan, is there was not an intrinsically safe fan when we initially installed this many years ago. As you're aware of, the National Fire Protection Agency code requires now that anything treating or handling sewage gas must be intrinsically safe. And the purpose for that is if somebody ever illegally dumps fuel, for example, that an incidental spark won't start that fuel, as you know, it'll basically be a bomb in the sewer system. And so everything's got to be intrinsically safe. Well, what we found was the little inline fan that we used to have on the station, we could not find an inline fan that was intrinsically safe. They just don't make it. And so we found the smallest intrinsically fan that we could. We found that the electrical system couldn't handle that fan. And so as part of the repair, we're going to have to upsize, pull out some wires, put some new wires in. It's all part of the repair. But my point is, it wasn't just a simple pull out the fan, put a new fan in. We were going to have to do a lot more work. And that's why, quite frankly, it got put on the back burner for me, is I've been busy doing some other things like the system on Paularino when we had that issue back in May. And I'm still catching up after that fun little project. But anyway, we have a fan. The fan will be probably in the January, February time frame, put back on this system. And I think at that point, we could eliminate the carbon canister and go back to what I think was relatively successful. And the nice thing about having a fan on there is it actually draws a vacuum, which then precludes, I'll say, the fugitive odors from coming out of little places like manholes and such.
Well, the fan isn't on the canister.
No, the fan would be on that one on the right as an example. It's like a 3-foot stub up, that
Yeah.
gray, bigger 8-inch gray pipe. Sorry, 6-inch gray pipe, I think it is. It will be, it will have a fan, it'll have a 90-degree, it'll go to a fan. Then from that fan, it'll go up about 10, 12 feet, and then it'll be discharged into the atmosphere.
So what you're doing is you're trying to get dilution. You blow the air up in the air and hope it gets diluted out before it finds a resident or a golfer.
Yes, and that's exactly what was taking place before. That there was a pipe about 10 foot tall with an inline fan on that unit on the right.
So, okay,
In a way, Director Rutan, it's a direct replacement. However, because now we've got a
Yeah.
slightly different fan, we have to upgrade some
Okay.
electrical.
interesting.
When was the Eldon apparatus put in?
You're talking about the carbon canister?
Same?
Tony, was it August or August?
It was in the summer.
But the golfers are still complaining.
We had complaints after, yes, a couple.
But yet you guys measure this and there's no significant.
I think it was coming from the manhole.
Oh, that's
Once
right. I'm
it's-
sorry. I beg your
manholes,
pardon. Yeah, you said that earlier.
On the.
Yeah,
manhole.
okay.
This thing depends on a lot of plugging and sealing.
Yeah, yeah,
When the water level in the sewer comes up, the air has to go someplace. It'll come out wherever it can,
yeah.
not necessarily through this unit.
Yeah, this is direct, Vice or President Schaefer, this is meant to be a temporary fix until
Right.
we get the fan replaced that was originally at Eldon. Now, the interesting thing about Presidents is I'm not sure that never had a fan on it. According to Dane Bauer, the neighbor next door, since he's been living there, the station has been odorous, and he's been there since before we actually replaced the President pump station with the current pump station that we have today. So after we install the replacement fan on Eldon, if it is successful, I plan to do the same thing at President's and install a fan on that station and do the same thing there. So I guess Director Rutan is correct. The solution to pollution is dilution. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm hoping that takes care of it because I think they're relatively minor issues at both of these stations. However, at 2 ppm, your general manager is absolutely correct. That's probably one of the more odorous concentrations, and it really does smell like rotten eggs. You get too high, you don't smell it. You get too low, you don't smell it. But that range right there is a telltale that you've got sewer gas.
Questions for Tony or Mark? Good job. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 5.
Mr. President, so this is we're talking about placing a permanent generator at we call it the Harbor Pump Station, but you can see in this picture, it's actually on Wilson. And as you see, there's just really no space really to install a generator. This is our second largest pump station in our system, which has the minimal amount of time to respond. When we get an alarm of high water at the station, we got about an hour to get there. So when we get any kind of texts about power outage or high water, staff drops everything and gets a generator, a portable generator to the station immediately. So as you see, the only alternative to place a generator is on private property, which Mark our district engineer is working with the private property owners to engage their willingness to allow us to buy a portion of the property to install the generator. If that does not come to fruition, we'll report back to the board with possibly eminent domain as a solution, which could be lengthy and expensive, but hopefully it doesn't get to that. But that would be one other option. Today, what we're really seeking for from the board is the type of generator you want to install. at the station. There's really three choices. You can do the traditional diesel generator, but that's heavily regulated by AQMD. We have to get a permit. They limit the amount of hours, amount of time we can operate that generator, and if we go over that limit, they could fine us. So they're really strict on diesel generators. The other is a natural gas generator. We have installed a natural gas generator over at the Irvine pump stations, actually in the Back Bay Shopping Center, and we installed the gas generator because of the high density. We felt that it's less pollutant, it's cleaner fuel. It'd be more appropriate to put a natural gas generator there versus diesel, which again I think would be ideal for Wilson as well, because you see it's a very highly dense area. So natural gas generator might be appropriate. The other third option we looked into is a hydrogen fuel cell type generator, and this is the direction we believe AQMD is moving towards, is to have these type of generators. Unfortunately, the technology is really not there at this point, especially for this type of size of a generator. The amount of cylinders we need, and we can't even guarantee that kind of energy has enough energy to turn on the pump stations. So we just don't think it's there right now. We also I had Mark do on his listserv to his colleagues out in California, find out if anyone have experience with hydrogen fuel cell generators at pump station, and no one responded back to us, because it leads us to believe it's just the technology is not there at this point. Maybe one day, but not yet. So we're seeking direction from the board. Do you want us to go diesel or natural gas? My recommendation is natural gas, but I'd like direction from the board. Mark will continue working with property owners on securing some property. If we can't, we will report back to the board on the results and get further directions from the board. But at this point, we're just thinking, what type of generator do you want us to install there?
Good.
I know we don't have the exact cost, but general price difference between diesel and the natural gas?
Pretty close.
Yeah, I'm gonna say they're probably within 20% of each other.
That far off.
Okay, so within 20, can you throw just a ballpark number on the cost of, say, the diesel, then I could do the rest of the math?
Okay. I believe that just the generator all by itself, not the wiring, not the trenching, not any of this other stuff, not the land acquisition, but just the generator set itself is probably going to be $100,000 to $140,000. Just the generator
So I
set.
think the diesel is the tier 3 now, you've got to go, I think it's about 130-ish.
Yeah. And this basically the unit that we have at the Irvine pump station would be basically the size that we would specify here. And as our general manager mentioned, I like the idea of a fuel cell. In fact, they make natural gas fuel cell, but what I found out talking with SCAP, it's Southern California, I can't remember the name of the acronym now. Association of POTWs, I believe is what it is, but they've been looking at it, and what they have determined that a fuel cell as a generator is a great idea. However, it takes about 30 minutes or so for the thing to start itself up, prepare it, and get ready to go. And I guess the concern I have is what's going to fail in that 30-minute startup if nobody is present.
Right.
So in addition to that, the concern is if you go with hydrogen, you've got hydrogen tanks out in public view. It takes more land. Where are you going to put all this stuff? And then what do we design the tank storage, and how much do you rely on?
I think hydrogen's out. We're not dealing with that right now, I don't think. Now the actual generator itself, so at I call it Irvine Ranch Market, but whatever. That's on private property. Are they renting that space to us? Did we buy it?
We bought it.
We bought it
years
ago.
Yes.
Okay. So they were so
They
a similar.
They were happy. Let's put it.
I could imagine.
I
So
remember.
then with this property owner, hopefully another similar deal would come into play.
I
Hopefully.
Our previous district engineer contacted several of the homeowners, property owners
Okay.
apartment owners, business owners. And basically, the only one he received a reply on, and the answer was no, was from the Jack in the Box. That's located, I'm gonna say, just south of the Shell
Right.
gas station there, and they basically said, no,
Right.
we're not interested in selling you any property. The El Campeon Market, I believe they have some parking restrictions, or parking is really the issue for that particular
Right.
business. And so if
Oh,
we,
yeah.
I'll say, take a couple of their spots away, I think they're marginally in compliance right now with city ordinances related to parking and all that other stuff. So that's going to be a particular issue. So I guess what I'm telling you the story is that it's not going to be easy to cite this. We will need a couple, I'm going to say probably a couple of parking spaces. Because if you look at the size of what's at the Irvine Ranch Market, I call it that as well.
Yeah.
It's not a small unit like over Presidents. It's a bigger unit.
And then the noise between the diesel and the natural gas.
Natural gas is quieter. I don't know the zone rating, to be honest with you, but it is quieter.
Yeah, because
It's more like a gas engine compared to a diesel.
no, right there, and within the relative price difference. So if we got to sell this to a property owner, quieter and blah blah blah, and better environmental, that might be a better sell to pay 20% more to do it.
Storage, just the storage of the diesel fuel there.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
other-
in the emissions alone, I mean, you got apartments right there.
right.
You know, so that's also gonna be a bigger sell for AQMD as well.
I think from my, I mean,
Natural,
that's the way to go.
I think natural gas is the way to go. My only question would be, where do we get the gas? Where does it come from?
Well, I wasn't here when we installed the Irvine generator set, but my understanding really the timeline is dealing with Southern California Gas and getting them to, I guess, develop us as a new customer in this specific location, because we do buy natural gas from the gas company. But any new service, it takes several months. I'm going to say a year to 18 months actually to get. By the time you work with them, pay the fees, get them to dig up the street, bring a service in, it's going to be, a year or two.
So there are gas lines obviously in that area.
I believe so, but until we contact Southern California Gas and give them our loads and how much fuel we would be using, and they take a look at their system to see where do they have to go to provide that with some comfort. I really can't say.
Okay. Bob?
Well, Mark and I worked together, and one of the precepts we had was there's many different ways to skin a cat. That being said, I was very surprised to see that staff have jumped to the conclusion that the generator needs to be there. We bought these generators back in 2010 or something, under the premise that, and then I think we had an emergency plan for this particular pump station. And we were comfortable, and I don't believe we've ever had sewage overflow at this pump station. Historically, though, pump stations were the major initial concern, and they were just instrumentation and whatnot. And so we spiffed them all up, bought the emergency generators. Have we ever had an overflow at this pump station?
No, we haven't, but I would say though, gosh, in the last 3 months, we've had quite a few power outages, which require the overtime of staff to take the portable generator over there. There's also been a lot of planned outages as well. I mean, just recently we saw a lot of issues going with Edison
Well, that's the new kid on the block.
yeah.
And let me add, this past winter when we had those atmospheric rivers, there got to a point where we did contact the Hispanic market, and they did allow us for a short term to leave a generator set in that end upper left-hand corner of their parking area, they allowed us to leave a generator set temporarily parked there. And the reason why that was important is, let's say it's a Saturday evening, it's wash day. That's probably the highest flow, I think. I mean, it used to be the highest flow day of the week because of clothes washing day. But let's say it's a Saturday evening, we're at high flow, the bars are running. By the time our standby gets the call, they have to get back to their house. They drive into the yard. They have to pick up a generator set. Hopefully it's not the one that's way back in the corner. And then they get out there. We're talking probably realistically a couple of hours. And then they got to hook the unit up. And so next thing you know, it's 2.5 hours and the water's rising, and they're watching this thing climb, and they get the thing energized, and boom, away they go. So I think what we're finding is during the rainstorms and during high flow, it's a little close for standby to get out there. And so as a result of Edison outages, whether it was rain related or other related, I don't know, but staff has gotten very uncomfortable. And that's why I'm interested in doing this, because staff is uncomfortable. Should they be? I don't know, but I will say that this is, like our general manager said, depending on whether you look at average flow or peak flow, this is either number 2 or number 3 largest station, and there's nothing on the station. No Godwin pump, no standby generator, nothing. There's 5 other stations, I believe: Eldon, Irvine, Victoria, Presidents, and I think, what's the other one? Is it Mendoza? Might have either a engine-driven pump or a generator set, and 19th, and even one more than I thought. And so why would the number 2 or number 3 largest station not have one? And so this is the last one I think we need to install. Rob Hamers, for some reason, he had it in there to install one, but I think the only reason it got bypassed was we could not find land, and I think that will be the issue here. But because of the rainfall, and let me back up and say one more thing. The 2020 master plan update that our RBH prepared. Now, granted, I think I'll be gone, and maybe except for Director Eccles, you'll probably all be retired like me when we hit ultimate flows. But if you look at the ultimate flows based on the new advent of ADUs, that station will go up to about 1,900 gallons a minute, and that pump station is rated at 1,600 gallons a minute. So that pump station is only going to get larger over the next 20 to 30 years. It's going to need to get larger pumps. And so as a result of what we're forecasting in the future, based on the experience with Edison, based on rainfall and staff call out time, and because this is a very important station and very large station for us, I really would feel a lot more comfortable installing this thing. And I get it. There's 2 or 3 hours of time, but it gets eaten up pretty fast if you're the guy that's out there at night.
Mark, the report said you had 1 hour, and you're saying we have 2 to 3 hours.
I think typically speaking, we're going to have 2 to 3 hours to get out there.
Because the cycle time between the pumps, what I think staff is using is the pump size, and if the thing cycles on and off 4 times in an hour, even during peak flow, that's 1/4 of that, which makes the sewage rise 4 times slower. Anyway.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And you just made my point, though, that whether you call it an hour, and I haven't done any flow studies, and that's one thing I was talking with RBH is, as we move forward, I would like to get out there and do some testing, get out there, peak flow, stop the pump, and then time how quickly this rises. Because what's an unknown is how much storage do you have in the collection system, not necessarily the wet well. And so I would like to do some of that just to have a better feel for this. But I will acknowledge there's 2 to 3 hours, but still, again, when you're the standby person, that time goes real fast.
I don't have a problem with that, but the flow to that station after it was designed has been reduced by 1/3, according to the Orange County Sanitation District peak flow or average flows. I have a lot of unanswered questions.
Sure.
Staff published, RBH and staff published something, well, when I first came on the board, we had a lot of pump station questions. So they went through and they gave this station 3 hours of detention. Now, I don't believe I don't know how they did that, or I have to trust you better than them.
Well, I don't know about you should trust me better, but I think Rob was a pretty darn good engineer. And if he said there was 3 hours, I believe
Well,
at that point in time, there was probably 3 hours.
But that's what the data they did.
Yes.
For basically my questions around, what stations need attention.
Yeah.
So I think the time is on our side. I think the emergency plan, you've supplemented it with, stationing a generator there when the flow gets worse during rainfalls. Edison's lack of maintenance is the new kid on the block. Or their poor maintenance or no maintenance or whatever.
However you want to say it, I will say I know that particular station, and I think Tony will support me on this, is there's been a lot of outages at that station.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in the cycle time because these pumps are so much larger in comparison to the flow that they were designed for. Because the flows of, during water conservation, the flows have decreased across at least the regional system, maybe not this particular pocket. So I think staff needs to do what you're talking about and go out. They know what the cycle time is on the pumps. The sewage comes up, the pumps, and if it goes down in 4 minutes. Anyway, there's a lot of unanswered questions in my mind. I think staff jumping to the conclusion, I don't yet buy staff jumping to the conclusion that the decision is what kind of generator or what kind of fuel we're going to put in the generator. I would like to see staff take the time, to give me some assurance and reassure themselves.
Yeah, to Harbor and going back, go back to last winter and you will see I'll say flow estimates for the Harbor is one of the 4 stations we use to figure out inflow and I into the station during a rainstorm. And that, or Eldon and Harbor are 2, I'll say, those always tend to be very high in
In the inflow, ingress and egress. Yeah, but that begs the question about, if those pumps at the size they are can pump that down pretty quickly, it's going to take a while. Or that's what I want to know.
Sure, and
A little more detail.
I was going to get there.
I will.
Director Rutan, as you're probably aware, Harbor Pump Station pumps about 660. I mean, the inflow is 660 gallons a minute. That's what
the pump sized at.
No, the pump is sized at 1,600 gallons a minute, and we pump 1,600.
Okay.
I don't believe cycle time is necessarily the issue here. It's how much time do we have when the pump cannot run because of a power outage.
Well, that's true.
That's a question that needs to be answered. And I believe based on data that when Rob did that, I don't know if it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but at that time, as you mentioned, it was 3 hours. I'm not sure that has increased for this particular station. But again, that's something that we'll be working on when we begin to look at this project in earnest. And it's by the time we do some homework, we start sizing the generator, and if we can find some property, that's probably the biggest hurdle here. I'm going to say this is probably 2, 3, 4 years in the making to be honest.
Okay.
we're not rushing in. We're not going to buy any generator sets tomorrow. But I believe that, and it's just my gut based on what Tony and the other standby folks have told me, is this is the one last station that's in concern. I'm not sure why Rob had suggested we put one in there. I've been trying to look for his calculations, but he did reach out to Jack in the Box and several property owners. I gotta trust that Rob knew something that I don't know, and he figured out that we do need a station there, and perhaps it's because it's probably our second largest station. So,
I understand that.
Director, Vice President Schaefer has a question.
Okay. You know, I'd just like us to look at it environmentally at what we're doing, because I think the natural gas is perfect for this, because we would consider the surroundings and we would consider the people that might be complaining because of noise or different ideas that they have.
I agree 100%. Natural gas is the correct decision if in fact we need it and or we can cite it.
I just think it's good for that area. Because your surrounding area is located where you gotta consider the environmental part too.
100% agree.
Hopefully we put a bow on this one because sorry, I think we're getting way into some weeds that we're not even near this. It sounds like we're in favor of looking at natural gas solutions, if I'm hearing everyone correctly. That's what we're tasked with here today, because if we don't get property, it's a whole different discussion, and I don't even want to think about that. So continue your property search and options, bring back some further details that we got, but I think the consensus is natural gas is the way to go, but you're not buying it tomorrow anyway. So we're a little bit premature, I think. So
One final point of clarification. I'm the only one other than Director Eccles that's looking at retirement. You are already retired.
well, I meant retirement from our board, not necessarily retirement from your job.
Oh, that's a prognosis.
Wait,
that
wait.
staff shouldn't dig-
Way to shuffle your
Term-
feet.
yeah.
All right. Let's move to item 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Burns, District Council. He's going to give this report.
Good morning,
Thank you.
Counselor.
Good morning, Mr. President, board and staff. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. So staff has been working on a revision of the purchasing authority and procedures for the district. The main goal was to separate the general purchasing authority, which is quite unlimited in the law in terms of what we can do, from public project provisions, which is very limited and very restricted. We also sought to separate the exceptions to the general purchasing authority, which has broader exceptions from the public project exceptions, which is very limited, and basically it's emergency repair work, which has a highly regulated procedure you have to follow. So the changes by chapter are this is as proposed. The general purchasing, we use a best value in that, and this would be all your purchases, from pencils to service contracts, everything you do other than public projects. Any bidding procedure that serves the public interest, $15,000 or less, we're proposing. Direct bidding procedure, where quotes are obtained and a record is kept, and that would be used from $15,000 up to $60,000. And then informal bidding, which is where you have something like a bid spec, that would be up to $125,000. And then formal bidding, where you have to do the full-on 14-day bid process, criteria for ranking and all of that, is $125,000 and above. So under the public projects, we do, and by the way, there's many different exceptions from bidding in the general authority, and that includes, we've already bid it, and other agencies bid it. We are not getting bids, like 6 different exceptions. So for public projects, what we'd ask for is this would be all the construction and demolition, and whenever you build what we call a public works, basically, We've adopted the alternate bidding procedure under state law, which allows us to do something different than the general bidding, where you have to go out to public bid for everything over $5,000, or maybe it's $10,000 now. But now we were proposing that less than 60,000 could be performed by negotiated bid or by district's own forces. Now, the general manager is backing off on that, and he wants to make that 30,000. So we'll get to that in a minute. 60,000 to 125,000 in that general zone, we'd use informal bidding procedures. We'd use the trade journals. We do 10 days notice of mailing. And then $125,000 or more, it would be the formal bidding procedure using public notice, a public notice and 14 days notice time period, sealed bids, the full-on public bidding. The emergency public project work has its own chapter so that it could be followed easily. Basically, the board makes a finding by 4/5 vote that the emergency is such that we can dispense with bidding. That has to be reviewed every 14 days. There's also a provision for the manager to make that determination, but then his decision has to be reviewed by the board within 14 days if we have a regular meeting, if not, within 7 days. So basically, we really need to be doing special meetings or emergency work when the manager makes that determination. You've received some comments from Mr. Mosher on this matter. Just a couple of comments in response. This is a conceptual draft. This is not the draft that was ever intended for you to adopt. We started out giving you an ordinance that could be adopted, and then we realized we're parallel tracking the operations code, and it didn't seem to be much sense to do one published notice and reprinting in the book and a resolution confirming that the ordinance was adopted, and do that for both ordinances, when if we can get your conceptual approval, we can do this in one fell swoop, hopefully, or maybe a couple of meetings, but basically one action. So other chapters, yes, we will have other chapters will be affected. They'll get other numbers. That's intended. They don't relate to public bidding, but they're just in the Title IV sequence, so we have to renumber those. And I think what Scott is going to ask you for, as I mentioned, is that he's comfortable with going up to 30,000. And I'll tell you in a minute what the state law allows. So generally, under 30,000, any bidding procedure that serves the public interest for a general, for general bidding under 15,000, any bidding procedure that serves the public interest. Up to 60,000, you do a phone solicit, and a record is kept of the phone solicitation. Up to 125,000, a bid spec would be prepared and bids would be received. And over 125,000, you'd use a formal process. Now, the state law is very broad in terms of what we can do under general purchasing. We can have our own procedures, and technicalities aren't going to trip us up. Nobody's going to be able to sue us for not crossing a T or dotting an I, basically. And we can use best value. But then we're going to do a separate chapter for public project bidding. And this is the one that we now have a $5,000 limit. Scott, the state law allows 60,000, but Scott's wants you to consider maybe 30,000, where we can use district forces or a negotiated bid for public bidding. And then 30 to 125, we'd use the trade journals and informal bidding, 10 days notice. Over 125,000, we'd use formal sealed bidding with the full-on notice. Now, state law allows up to 60,000 for negotiated contracts, up to 200,000 for informal bidding, and this is all specified in state law. And formal bidding is over 200,000. But the board has determined that they don't want to be that generous with the authority. And this board has determined to give the authority that we have currently, which is up to 60,000, and then up to 125,000 instead of the 200,000. Emergency work is an exception. I've already described that for you. I'm not going to go over that again. 4/5 vote, you have to have substantial evidence, and you have to ratify that by board action every so often. So that's what we're proposing for you. We do have a couple of, Mr. Mosher has a couple of little good comments on some sentences that are awkward that could be straightened out, but this is the meat of the ordinance and where we would like your input and your comfort level with the authority to go out to bid or not formal bid within those dollar amounts that have been proposed. I'm available for any questions. I know that's a lot to digest. Hopefully we can make some progress on this.
Questions for Alan? Anybody? I'm okay with the limits here requesting. I mean, still staying below the state, I think is a good approach. I mean, shows we're at least taking a look at it. So I'm okay with. Go ahead.
Just, Alan, you'd mentioned we were looking at 60, but then our general manager was requesting 30, but then I see 60 in the report. So where's that?
That just within 24 hours, and Scott
Right.
said he wasn't comfortable going all the way to 60, so I'll let Scott talk, but
We had the
30,000
conversation.
proposing.
Thank you. We had the conversation yesterday, so it was already posted on it. So that's why we had the conversation. But my feeling was, I saw not too long ago, there was a story, I think the Voice of OC about city manager's discretion in signing contracts. And they really were critiquing those city managers that had those high levels. And I don't want to put this board in that position. So that's why I said, let's go with 30,000, see if we're okay with that.
And okay, that I would agree, because I read the same thing. We don't need that sort of scrutiny,
Right.
and nor do you or anything else. Now, in the public bidding process, what really, in summary, is changing dollar wise? That's what I'm trying to figure out versus I mean, best value is whatever, but what's changing?
It's just in the lower dollar amounts, up to 30,000. The manager can use district forces, or he can negotiate a bid contract. Doesn't have to bid it up to 30,000. That saves a lot.
And after 30, it goes to the formal best value bid practice,
Well,
right?
it goes to informal bidding, 30 to 125,000, which means you use the trade journals and you send out the 10 days notice. And then over 125,000, it's the full on sealed bidding, 14 days public notice. So there's basically 3 tiers there for a public project.
Right. Okay. So the informal and formal, though, if that's what we're doing, that's essentially the same thing. It's just public noticing is a major deal.
Yes, and possibly the detail and the specifications, but not much of a difference.
Okay.
I'm going to say there isn't any difference in what we're
Right.
doing today.
Right.
And I mean, was it a couple months back, this board, as you recall, approved the $15,000 limit. Appreciate that. But if we move the 60,000 in the direct bidding to 30 and we keep the 125 and the 125 for informal, the being that number between formal and informal, it's exactly how it is today. This is how we're operating today.
Now we're just
We're
codifying it in.
It's been codified, but because let me back up and say the reason why, and I appreciate our legal counsel doing this work, is that over the last probably 10 years, there have been so many changes to the purchasing ordinance and the various levels, and the way that we've mixed some, I'll say, procedural and policy issues into this ordinance. And so it's gotten very convoluted, and it was very difficult to follow. And so what our legal counsel has done is basically cleaned this up, brought it back to bare bones to reflect what we're doing today, but in plain English and with all the extra stuff removed. That's all we're doing today.
Okay. And I agree with President Schaefer. I mean, for the most part, and with that 30,000 reduction, I'm fine with it. But I think, because at the end of the day, the public someone will find this, and so I would like to see it go to the CAC as recommended and then brought back to us, just so in case someone on that committee says, oh, wait, I want to know it at least. So, all right, cool.
Good.
Good direction.
Yes,
Thanks, Counselor.
Thank you, Alan.
thank you.
All right, finally, staff, any other comments? Anything else? Directors, any other comments? All right, then I will adjourn us at 10:02. Yeah.